Tony's Bread by Tomie dePaola. This is a story from Italy. It's an Italian folk tale. There are some words in here that are Italian, and I'm going to do the best that I can to pronounce them. Once, a long time ago, in a small village outside the grand city of Milano, there lived a banker named Antonio, but everyone called him Tony. Tony made bread and only bread in his bakery. It was good and simple, and the villagers loved it. But Tony had a dream. One day he would have a bakery of his own in Milano and become the most famous baker in all of northern Italy. Now Tony lived with his only daughter, Serafina. He was a widower, which means that his wife has passed away, and he had raised Serafina from the time she was una piccola bambina, a little girl, and how he had spoiled her. Antonio treats Serafina like una principessa, a princess, said Zia Clotia. The finest clothes, the finest jewelry, anything her heart desires, said Zia Caterina. She never has to lift a finger. All she does is sit looking out the window and eating dolci, sweets, said Zia Clorinda. Now that she is old enough to marry, Tony thinks that no man is good enough for his Serafina, the three sisters whispered to each other. That was true. Tony did think that no man was worthy of his darling daughter. He would not even talk to the young men in the village who wanted to court Serafina. So poor Serafina would sit at the window behind the curtains, eating her dolci and crying. One day, Angelo, a wealthy nobleman from Milano, was passing through the village. He went by Tony's house. The wind blew the curtains away from the window, and there sat Serafina. Angelo and Serafina looked into each other's eyes, and it was love at first sight for both of them. The three sisters were standing nearby. Dear ladies, Angelo asked them, who is that lovely creature sitting at that window? Che bella donna! What a beautiful woman! Is she married or spoken for? Ah, young signor, said Zia Clotia. That is Serafina, the daughter of Tony the baker. No, she is not married. And not likely to be for some time, said Zia Caterina. No one is good enough for Tony's little Serafina, Zia Clorinda explained. Well, we'll see about that, said Angelo. Now, aunties, tell me all you can about her. The young nobleman and the three sisters sat and talked and talked and talked. And before long, Angelo knew all about Serafina and Tony the baker. And he knew all about Tony's dream of becoming the most famous baker in all of northern Italy. Grazie, aunties. Thank you, said Angelo. I think I have the plan that will give Tony his dream and give me the wife of my dreams. But I will need your help. This is what I want you to do. The next day, a letter arrived at the bakery for Tony. Dear Signor Baker, I am Angelo, a nobleman from Milano. I was passing through your village and was lucky enough to taste your fine bread. Would you be so kind as to meet me in front of the church after Mass on Sunday so we may talk? I have a proposal to make to you. Angelo di Milano. Dear Bella Serafina. It says, a secret letter arrived at Tony's house for Serafina. Dear Bella Serafina, I saw you at your window, and I love you. Here's a ring to keep as a symbol of my adoration. It will not be long before we are husband and wife. Love, Angelo, your true love. Wow. And Zia Clotilda, Zia Caterina, and Zia Clorinda did their part. Oh, Tony, did you see that rich young man from Milano? Zia Clotilda asked. He wanted to know all about you. It seems he just loved your bread, said Zia Caterina. Nothing like it in all Milano, he said. Zia Clorinda. told Tomie. "Why, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to meet you the way he went on." "Well, dear ladies, funny you should say that, because he does want to meet me after Mass on Sunday," said Tomie. "His name is Angelo di Milano." "Imagine that," the three women exclaimed. "Che bella fortuna! What good luck you have!" "And for Serafina," they whispered to each other. "And so, Signor Antonio, I would be most pleased if you and your lovely daughter would come to Milano as my guests," Angelo said. "And if you like our city, I would be proud to set you up in a fine bakery of your own near the Piazzas del Duomo, the Cathedral Square. Your fame would be assured, Signor Antonio. I will see to that." Tomie couldn't believe his ears. His dream was about to come true. "Why, thank you, Signor Angelo. But please call me Tomie. All my friends do. Also, Signor Tomie," Angelo continued, "the advantages for your beautiful daughter would be great. I admit I would not find it unpleasant for Serafina to sit beside me at my great table as my wife, the daughter of Tomie, the most famous baker in Milano." That did it. Tomie agreed, and off he and Serafina went with Angelo. Together they walked all the small streets around the cathedral square and visited all the bakeries and pastry shops. They tasted torta, cake, and biscotti, cookies, and pan, bread, and Tomie was depressed. The bread alone was like nothing Tomie had ever tasted. Bread made out of the finest, whitest flour, shaped like pinwheels, bread with seeds of all sorts scattered over the top. "It is no use, Signor Angelo," said a very sad Tomie. "I can never compete with all these fine bakers and pastry shops. All I can make is bread, and very simple bread at that. I would be the laughing stock of Milano. It is better if Serafina and I just go home." "No, never!" Angelo shouted. "Oh, Papa, no!" Serafina cried. Not only was she in love with Angelo, but she was looking forward to living in that grand house with all those good things to eat. "If only you could make bread that tasted as good and as sweet as candied fruit and these raisins," Serafina said. "Or," Angelo said, getting another idea, "as rich and sweet as this cup of punch made from milk and eggs and honey." "Milk, eggs, honey?" Tomie said, thinking out loud. "Candied fruit," Serafina said. "Raisins," Angelo chimed in. "That's it," all three shouted. "I shall make the richest, lightest, most wonderful bread anyone has ever tasted, out of the whitest flour, the biggest eggs, the creamiest milk, the sweetest candied fruit, and the plumpest raisins," Tomie shouted. "Oh, Papa!" Serafina cried, kissing her father. "Servants!" Angelo called, and he sent them off to buy all the finest ingredients Tomie would need. The next morning, Tomie, Serafina, and all the supplies headed back to the little village, and Tomie began to work. Day after day, he experimented until he had mixed the lightest, richest dough with as many raisins and as much candied fruit as he could put into it. Now he was ready to bake. He sent word to Angelo in Milano that he should come to the bakery the next afternoon. Then he set out the dough in large bowls and went to bed. As Tomie slept, the dough began to rise, and rise, and rise. The next morning, he filled every pan in his shop. One piece of dough was left over, so he threw it in the flour pot and baked it too. In a flour pot. When Angelo arrived, the bread was just coming out of the oven. Everyone held his breath and waited while Tomie cut a slice of his brand new bread. Angelo tasted it. Serafina tasted it. Tomie tasted it. Zia Clotilda, Zia Caterina, Zia Clorinda, all tasted it. "That's it!" they shouted. "I'll take these loaves back to Milano to see what my friends say," Angelo said, and off he went. In just a few days, a letter and a large cart filled with ingredients arrived in the village. Dear Tomie, here are more supplies. Make as much bread as you can and send it to me. Then, when I send for you, I promise you will enter Milano with flags flying, and Serafina will be mine. Your future son-in-law, Angelo. P.S. Please bake all of the loaves in flower pots. My friends like the shape of that loaf the best. In the flower pots. Very interesting. Just before Christmas, Angelo sent for Tomie and Serafina. Sure enough, when their coach entered Milano, crowds were cheering and flags were flying. Bienvenuto, Tonio. Welcome, Tomie, the crowd cheered. The bishop and the mayor were there to greet Tomie and Serafina. And, said the mayor, Milano is so happy to have you here, so we may always have enough of your wonderful bread. The next day, when the bakery door was opened, the bishop's guards were called to keep order. All of Milano was there, except for Serafina and Angelo, who were being married quietly in a small chapel in the cathedral. And during their wedding, all they could hear were the crowds cheering, calling for pan de Tonio, Tony's bread. And to this day, the panettone of Milano is eaten and enjoyed, especially at Christmas. Brava, Serafina. Bravo, Angelo. Bravo, Tomie. Tony's bread. Made in flower pots. How interesting.